the international break's coming at the right time for a lot of teams, Kilmarnock in particular, so they can get sort of everyone back and, you know, hope everybody there is recovering from this horrible kind of illness. But I think the season's gone quite well. The pay-per-view thing has revolutionised the league for me.
Oh, yeah.
Because, as I say, I get to watch a lot more. I mean, Sky's coverage is diabolical. So they want the... On Sky Sports main event, they had the Celtic St Johnstone game. They cut away at half-time so they could cover the Man United game, which didn't start for another hour. So they just treat it with such contempt. Whereas BT, who had it last season, the coverage on there was excellent. You know, they really they had a bunch of pundits who really knew the game, really cared about the game. There was a production company called Sunset and Vine who put the coverage together, like fantastic, like really treated it with respect. And I think for the League Cup, which was like the last sort of major final that they were going to do, they had like 9 hours of build up, you know, before the game and stuff. It was just glorious to watch. So it's a real shame that it's kind of just dumped on Sky at 12 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon, you know, but this pay-per-view has meant that you can pick and choose and watch any game you like, you know, and it's good, especially now that there's going to be, you know, games to catch up on. So like when we play Aberdeen, that'll be on pay-per-view, or when Motherwell catch up against Kilmarnock, that game will be on pay-per-view, so you can catch it if you want. So I think from that perspective, it's kind of revolutionised the league for me. Oh, yeah. But going into the international break, Rangers top, Celtic second, Celtic with a game in hand. I think it's going to be like this for the next sort of couple of months, and then, you know, can Rangers get through Christmas? I think that's the big question. Yeah.
Well, I think how do you think Aberdeen? Because Aberdeen are the other team that are, you know, they've got games in hand as well. And one of them's against Celtic. Do you reckon? I mean, it is between Rangers and Celtic, but I think Aberdeen could hang in there a bit longer.
I think Aberdeen have impressed this season. After I got over my anger about their utter contempt for, you know, the rules when 8 of their players got done on a night out. But I think there's going to be a real titanic battle between Aberdeen and Hibs to see who's going to fit Rangers and Celtic, and I think that's going to be really, really interesting. But I think Aberdeen, well, they've already pulled away if they're 9 points clear of the team in 5th. But I think those they sort of cutting themselves loose. So I think Aberdeen and Hibs might be in a little bit of a mini league by themselves. I think that'll be very interesting. I think Aberdeen Celtic is going to be a really interesting game because they lost their first game of the season against Rangers, and then apart from having a ridiculous 3-0 defeat by Motherwell, which came from absolutely nowhere, like it's Motherwell who hadn't won a game all season, then all of a sudden go and talk Aberdeen 3-0 just after losing at Hamilton. You know, this league makes no sense sometimes. But I think. Well, I don't think they'll trouble Rangers and Celtic. I think they'll hang in with Hibs for the most part, and that'll be a really interesting battle. Yeah, cool. So that is the SPFL. I'm going to say it's time to talk about the Premier League, but given everything that's happened this weekend, James, I really don't know where to start.
Actually, why don't we start with... there's just one thing I wanted to bring up from last weekend, because we haven't had a show since last weekend as well. And there was... And I don't really want to get into the handball kind of debate. I think everyone's kind of had enough of that. I think it's a mess. We all kind of know it's a mess. And I think VAR seem to be getting things right, and then they're just throwing another spanner in the works with kind of this kind of handball kind of. It's a farce. Whether you agree with that there should be penalties or not, like it's a bit silly. But the one thing I want to mention from last weekend was the Man City Leicester kind of result, and we'll talk about this in isolation because of what's happened the weekend after. Kind of like I don't want to say how great Leicester kind of were. But the one thing I want to talk about was when sort of the way that Pep Guardiola and Rodri as well, the kind of midfielder, came out and said that they didn't like it when teams just sat back and defended against them and just put men behind the ball and didn't want to play football. I think that's hopefully that's just them saying that in public. But I'm not sure why Rodri would come out and say that. Because part of me thinks that that's basically giving the green light to teams of how to beat Man City, basically. Yeah. And Leicester didn't just sit behind the ball and kind of soak up the pressure and just punt it long. And Leicester played a a very good kind of counter-attacking team, a counter-attacking system, and it worked very, very well.
To the tune of 5 goals, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was ridiculous. And the other thing that I want to mention from it was, if you do look at Rodri's comments on sort of social media, if you watch Match of the Day last week, Match of the Day 2 last week, Jermaine Genius was saying that the Premier League risks losing its kind of like its USP, its kind of brand of kind of like exciting football if they continue with this kind of VAR handball kind of mess. If you read the comments after Rodri's kind of talking about the game, the number of Man City fans, and I'll use fans with quotations around it, who said that Leicester only won because they got 3 dodgy penalties. I think it proves that more people don't watch any football but call themselves fans.
Yeah, I think that's
ever realised was kind of the case. And the number of people who just simply put up the stats and said that, well, look, we had more possession, we had more shots off target, therefore we deserved. Therefore you can't tell me that Leicester were playing anything other than ultra defensive. I think it shows that far more people than I ever thought possible don't actually watch football and just call themselves fans. So and then go and talk about it on social media as well. So yeah.
The other thing as well today is I was listening to 5 Live in the car, and Manchester United got quite heavily beaten today. And somebody said it was something like, "Oh, our defence is more like a National League team than a Champions League team." I was like, "Wee man, you've probably never even watched a National League game."
Yeah.
So, like, for a start, they're actually worse than a National League team, right? So, but no, it's like so. Like I'm in the position where I watch a lot of Scottish football. When I do go to football down here, I normally go and see Gateshead, who at the moment are playing in the National League North. So I don't see anything other than pure 100% commitment from those lads, right? Yeah. And to say that our defence is like a National League team is an absolute insult, right? Because you're to watch the Manchester United defensive performance against Tottenham today, right? And then put the body language, the attitude, the effort of any of that back four in Manchester United today, and stand it up against the effort, the commitment, the body language of anybody playing for Hartlepool on Saturday, for example, right? And do you know what? I imagine there's not one Manchester United player could match a National League defender for commitment and passion and all of that stuff. Now, and I think that's exactly right. The people who talk like that and mention things like that have absolutely no idea what it's like to watch football with anything other than, at the top level. So I think that Manchester United fans are just so that they're not winning things at the minute, and you know what? You can't win everything all the time. And I totally agree with you on that. It's mind-boggling the amount of people who don't know what it's like to watch football, or look at stats and think, "Oh, we should have won that game. We had 95% or 75% possession." So that's not how the game works. And the thing is, as well, it's all well and good for Pep Guardiola to come out and say, "I don't like when teams sit in and defend against us." I was like, "Well, do you know what, Pep? See if every other team in the league had the same budget as you, then that's fine, right? But you've got 10 times the budget of Brendan Rodgers, right? So if he wants to come in and sit in and hit you on the break 5 times, right, then that's fine. And anybody who would watch those penalties and think they were dodgy, again, don't have a clue about it. I mean, we've got nothing at stake with Manchester City or Leicester, right? So we can look at it relatively objectively and say every one of them was a stone wall penalty. They don't even have the luxury of the kind of that ridiculous penalty that Newcastle got against Spurs last week. They don't have that luxury of kind of falling back on VAR because they were just penalties. Plain and simple. Yeah. But yeah, so you sort of set me off on a bit of a rant there. I apologise, but
we should talk about the other side of that Man United Tottenham game today.
Yes,
and just you have to say, I don't think it's been said enough what I've seen so far. You do have to say well done to Tottenham. I was very, very down on Tottenham at the beginning of the season. It seemed like Jose Mourinho was coming out with excuses, especially after that first game against Everton, that pointed to me to a very unhappy kind of camp and a kind of disorganised sort of camp. But he's like every prediction that I make at the minute, they've definitely turned it around, and that's sort of like 2 kind of good performances in a row, I'd say. Was that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, they got, like we said, Newcastle got a very, very late penalty handed to them.
Oh, hey.
Hey, but and that doesn't happen. Then all of a sudden their season looking very, very good indeed. Going through in the EFL, going through in the Europa League. They've probably played Son and Kane more than they probably wanted to, but they managed to kind of seem to be rotating the players enough so far, and they've had a bit of luck. If they felt hard done by, and they rightly can do, about Newcastle getting a late equaliser, was it Macedonian team that imploded against them and conceded
Bulgaria, yeah.
Stuff, in the Europa League qualifying. It's kind of held them back, but they kind of came roaring back against Southampton a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah,
they probably should have beaten Newcastle, and then today they've had I'd say unprecedented result, but there's another one to talk about. So I think, do you think Tottenham do deserve like a lot of credit? And you've got to wonder, does Gareth Bale get into that first team?
Well, who needs him at this point? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
but so I guess we'll kind of cover off yesterday's games first before we move on to the utter mentalness that was today. So the first game of the weekend, Chelsea ran out comfortable 4-0 winners against Crystal Palace. So they look as if they are, after a little bit of a stutter, look like they're kind of hitting their stride a little bit. Pulisic coming back is going to be massive for them. Everton remain unbeaten with a 4-2 win against Brighton. Now, this is the game I watched yesterday. Leeds United won, Manchester City won. Now, that was probably one of the most entertaining games of football I have watched in a long, long time. It was just two teams attacking each other, going at each other, battering each other, and given the level of difference in sort of finances between the two, Leeds were just so. They didn't look out of place at all, and I thought they did really well and thoroughly deserved their point. I think a point was a fair result in that game. I think if Man City had snatched it, or even if Leeds had snatched it, I think I would have felt a bit disappointed and I have no love for Manchester City at all. But no, I think, and that's what football's all about. You should sit down to watch 90 minutes of football, and when you get up at the end of it, you should feel thoroughly entertained, and that is 100%. Entertainment yesterday. I mean, obviously I've watched two games today and was thoroughly entertained for totally different reasons, but that was a proper Premier League game last night.
It was, and that was like the long-awaited Bielsa versus Guardiola.
Like the master and the apprentice, wasn't it? So
and of course it was followed up by the similarly technical masterpiece that was Steve Bruce as Sean Dyche as well, wasn't it?
Well, indeed, yes. With Newcastle running out 3-1 winners, and quite a great goal from San Maximin, or whatever his name is. It was a great goal. But yeah, so well done. I mean, obviously living where we do, James. I mean, I obviously live closer to Newcastle than you do, but I think it's just a happier place when Newcastle win. I think.
I've always had a fondness for hard-working teams that have got a goal scorer in them. I just like teams that have got a goal scorer. And I think I've mentioned it a few times. I mentioned it in the Scottish football preview that we did.
Yeah.
I've mentioned it that, goal scorers can turn a team from mediocre to, decent, or from bottom of the league to sort of, mid-table sort of thing. And I think Callum Wilson, I'm not sure if he will get back in the England team or England squad, just because there simply seem to be so many strikers at the minute, but he seems to be in good form, and if he can continue that, I think Newcastle could be in for I think they'll be in for a good season. I think him and San Maximan and Joe Ellington seem to play a lot better. I think that could paper over a lot of cracks for Steve Bruce.
Yeah,
and I know he's not the most attack-minded manager, but if you've got San Maximan. If you've got Callum Wilson up front, you've got any sort of combination of San Maximan, Fraser, and Joe Ellington behind him, and Hendricks as well in centre midfield alongside of Shelvey. There is creativity there, isn't there? As well as the Longstaff brothers to come in as well. There is some creativity. That could be a decent attacking unit if he can get him into a system that works.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is can he get out his own way enough to get those players playing together? Cool. Okay, so that brings us on to today. So the first